Well, many years ago, before I even came to Swarthmore, about 9 years ago, Mandy and Helen, who was a basic skills tutor, thought that people with learning difficulties needed to have a bit more than just a class every week. They needed to have their learning reinforced and to have sort of task-based learning. And from that, more younger people were coming along. So it started with adults and then it started with younger people building up their skills and finding bits of project funding to support this sort of learning. So people were beginning to have work experience alongside improving their maths and English and getting a general education.
Our study programme was really a development from some years of participation in a variety of projects looking at how people learn best. And we found over the years that people with learning difficulties, really the best way for them to actually accumulate some kind of knowledge and understanding is to actually do things, not sit in the classroom and do them, actually go and apply them to useful things in their everyday life. So having done various projects with adults, really, we then started to look at the young people that are coming through our door to do part-time courses, because that's what Swarthmore's traditionally been about, doing part-time courses, and thought, actually, this is what these young people need. They've somehow missed out in mainstream education. They've not been given the things that they need. And what they do need is more of a practical education to reinforce the things that they still need to learn, because they were coming to us at 17, 18, not having learned the basics, still not being able to read and write. And so we got some project funding, we set up in a small way, and then we developed it from there.
In 2010, we got a small amount of European Social Fund money that we were able to fund about 12 young people with another organisation, People in Action, and this is the sort of things we did. We employed a job coach, which was a really important addition to the team, who was able to really help the young people get into the work experience mode and find good placements that they could be supported on. And then we had the maths and English and IT approach and the general education for these young people. Then we realised the small amount of EFA money we got then was a different name then, it was YPLA, and we got about 20,000 a year. We thought we needed more than that. It was a lagged funding approach, so we would have had to wait 2 years for our money, and we couldn't really afford that. But at the time, the Learning and Skills Improvement Service were offering project funding, and we put in a bid to the Flexibility and Innovation Fund, and we got the money. And that was a really good year of proving to us that this model was very successful. So young people were coming along, getting good work experience, getting a general all-round education with everything embedded in English, maths and IT. And we thought we'd like to do more of this, and the opportunity came when the EFA and the local authority talked to us about the needs of the young people in the area, where there's a massive amount of young people with basically nowhere to go. So we thought we'd like to grow this provision, and we could actually manage to fund it in a lagged approach as long as we were careful and didn't have too many young people to start with. So we started with about 22 young people. It was quite hard work at first, because when they first came here, the top floor wasn't available, so we had them in different classrooms in the centre, and I think that was a time of more disruption for people because they didn't have their own dedicated space. And then once our roof was fixed and the WEA moved out, we got the top floor refurbished, and realised this would be a great learning space for the high needs support young people. The rooms are cosy, they're not massive. Everything was renovated and in time for the 2013 September intake. And that year, obviously there's a few teething problems with the area, but that year in all gave the young people a confidence that this was their space and they had ownership of that space. The tutors felt like they were dedicated, teaching them full time. They get more hours here than they would in a college environment because we're able to be creative with other funding we get. So all in all they get 720 hours when they come to Swarthmore as opposed to 600 anywhere else. And then the work experience side of it, where people are supported in their jobs and learn how to become more independent. They're also given travel training, so if they're not independent travellers, by the end of the first year most of the young people will be independent travellers and be able to get here on the bus rather than taking taxis from home. And we work closely with parents and carers.
The development of the course was very much, like I said, was linked to the fact that we saw that people needed basic skills. We knew that the staff team had to be very good. They had to be experts in their field, but they also had to be really good with people, dealing with change, taking responsibility. So that staff team has been created out of a pool of people who actually are passionate about education and also not afraid to step in and manage behaviour and manage emotional issues and liaise with employers and liaise with parents and other professionals involved with those young people. So that staff team, once you've got the funding, the staff team is critical to actually making the whole thing work.
Funding young people is always a strategic challenge depending on which government is in power. But at the top of the list are the 16 to 18 year olds, of which these high needs support young people sit, because in brackets you have 24 for people with learning disabilities. What we want to see is our young people leaving Swarthmore with a good education and in order to get a job, to have had the experience that they have had on their job placements to gain a job. The figures for working with young people with disabilities hasn't really improved in the last 20 years or even 30 years. We'd like to change that because there's enough unemployment amongst young people as there is, so having a disability or a learning difficulty makes it twice as hard to get a job. So we challenge that and we want these young people to succeed in working.
Funding's always a challenge. We were getting some funding for our young people from the Education Funding Agency. The challenge was to be able to develop a programme without funding, because the EFA funding is a lagged funding approach, i.e. they fund you on what you've done previously, not what you want to do in the future. So that was a bit of a challenge. So not being daunted by that, part of our way is to actually just go and ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. So we went to various contacts that we had and said, can you give us some money? And they found us bits of money. To continue with this, we went, myself and Maggie, who's the director, we went to the local authority and said, we're doing good work, will you fund us? Yes, they would. So a key point from this really is, if you don't ask, you don't get. So you just go and use people and ask them and show them what you're doing. Invite them in to see what you're doing. That's always a good thing.
They haven't had a good education at school, but they're getting one now. The tutors are really experienced. Some of them have worked in high schools for many years and they bring with them a wealth of experience. from their past.
Creating a safe space is an issue that we have had to struggle with because of the background of some of our young people who have come to us with a history of being bullied and being excluded, being marginalised for whatever reason, and we have had to overcome those in order to actually then be able to start educating them, giving them giving them the incentive really to actually engage with education, because previously it's been not a very nice experience for them. So it's a team approach. The tutors that we have are employed full time. They're employed full time throughout the year. They're here every day from 9 o'clock till 5 o'clock. So when the youngsters come in, they're here. They're here with them all day. If there are any issues or problems, they can go to them and talk them over, and we deal with things straight away, so that's really important.
So this is some of the ways you've overcome things, by dealing with things straight away.
Absolutely.
Employing your staff full time, so they're there, they build up the relationship with the students. If there's anything the students are unhappy about, they can go straight to the staff. So things are getting ironed out very quickly.
Yeah.
Maggie, can you tell me what the education, health and care plan is?
Yeah, that's just been implemented this year. The assessment 139A is now the education, health and care plan. In the past, 139A was for education, and then they would have had a separate plan drawn up for health. Now, any health provider or education provider can help that young person to complete a plan and can make sure that these young people get funded in the right way. So it's a more holistic approach to their needs. So they're not going to many different places, but everything happens to be in one place. And they carry these new education, health and care plans with them until the age of 24.
So we don't have this terrible situation where, student A says, well, my timetable for this week is, Tuesday morning I'm doing maths, and Thursday afternoon I'm doing English, and then they've got these kind of gaps in between. No, that doesn't happen. It's full on. It's a complete full-time course. That's what it's supposed to be. But one thing that the sub-team do is that they do actually plan very carefully what they're going to be delivering and the approach that they're going to be taking. Now, you won't probably see that on large amounts of bits of paper, but they have discussions every day and they all know what each of them are doing. And then, because it's well planned, then they can be flexible. Because they know what the goal is and they know what the goals are for each of those individual students, they can then be very flexible within that, because they always have in mind what the end result is supposed to be. So, social skills for this person, or improving their confidence to speak out loud for this other person, whatever it is. So it's a kind of it is very much a holistic approach to teaching, bearing in mind people's physical needs, their emotional state, mental health needs, medical issues that they have, emotional relationship type issues outside of here and within the group. It's all fun.
A range of challenges.
And we have to remember that these are teenagers, or they're young people who still are really going through those teenage years. That's an interesting thing, because they've not really been allowed to do that, most of them. They're kept quite young at school and by families who are naturally protective. So here they get to explore a bit about, there's that adolescence kind of thing. So that's interesting. That's a challenge, because other staff look at them and go, but they're 20, they're 23, whatever, they shouldn't be behaving like 14-year-olds. So that is a challenge, because you have to explain to people, yes, but these young people are developmentally still like 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, and they're going through all those emotions that happen when you get, you have your first relationship, and and they fall in, fall out with each other and whatnot. So all that happens here, So that's an interesting challenge.